I've been working on this idea for a while. The basic premise is that our curiosity often leads us to learn things that are detrimental to our lives. We've all had the experience of once you see it, you cannot unsee it with something that we care about, whether it be a movie or something one of our loved ones does. Once you see the truth about something, it ruins it for you forever. This also applies to magic. When the masked magician showed you how the trick was done, it ruined most magicians forever. In the bigger, more macro things in life, like government and the economy, these are fundamental to your sanity in relationships. Showing up to work every day becomes much harder when you realize the entire system really is a Ponzi scheme to keep the system itself going. I often try to sit with my father or others I love in my life while they watch television. I find myself spouting off things I've learned and been burdened with over the course of my life. When the news of some Law and Order Fear Every Man Around You show comes on, I become physically enraged sitting beside those who I love, watching them being spoon-fed the propaganda that keeps all of us atomized and mistrusting each other. I know this is a problem with me being an observant little monkey, and not an issue with my loved ones who are just normal human beings in our society. So the question then becomes, when is information we have not a tool or knowledge, but actually a burden upon ourselves? This is a question that is fundamental, that is at the fundamental core of our species. This is in all of us first stories, from the Greeks with Aphrodite's golden apples, who Heracles has to retrieve 12 from one of his labors, to the Mesoamericans' tree of life. These concepts that, if I'm honest, do not have an intellectual capability to comprehend or even try to expound upon, are part of an intellectual issue we are still wrestling with in our basic lives today. I think the truth is a lot of this has to do with the idea of purpose. Humans struggle with due to our worry about the finite nature of our existence. We concern ourselves with giving purpose to our lives because we're going to die. We're the only species on this planet who are truly cognizant of our upcoming demise, and we want to make our time count. I have found my purpose, as a lot of ancients did, through the need to continue on my bloodline and see myself as part of a lineage that didn't start and will not end with me. This idea, though, of burdening oneself with unnecessary information is a deep question. We've all heard some government agent in a movie say that this is need to know information. We look at children and tell them, I'll tell you when you are older. This oftentimes is not to burden them with things that would do harm to them. We do not want to see ourselves as children, but the average human being has always been a child in our society. The humans who inhabit the society we live in are small parts of an ant colony. Each has a specialized task it is asked to do. The ant out cutting apart a leaf and dragging it back or providing security doesn't need to know how many eggs the queen lays. It just needs to keep bringing calories back to the colony. This is no different for humans in our economy. We don't even know how the EPA works. Most humans would prefer not to know how their water arrives at their home. No one wants to know the amount of acceptable rodent turds in their Raisin Bran. We have a human who tests the cereal for this, and he is the only one who needs to actually know this information. The real thing you should be asking is, does he eat the cereal? We have created differing forms of government over the course of our species' history. The fundamental basic question that has been asked and weighed in judging their effectiveness, though, has not changed. Are we being fed? This is the beginning and ending point of almost all civilizations throughout history. The ability to rule has been tied to the fundamental basic premise of food production. After the Renaissance, most governments figured this out. We began to ask other questions. Are we getting richer? Are we creating art? Are we safer from crime? Is there new science being created? Do we have more rights? Of course, there were many famines after this. Ireland, South Italy, Ukraine, China, and India, just to name a few. People fled all these places, and massive amounts of human died during the events. In a lot of these places, the governments were overthrown or failed. The thing is, though, none of us actually have control over the levers that feed us. No single human actually needs to know about any of these things. We as humans, if we had a blight that hit, would starve with very little recourse. We're not paying close attention to the water levels or bacterial levels in our crops. Every day, though, we're inundated with stories about water shortages in places where we grow our crops. We get news reports about the organic bananas causing the destruction of the rainforest, yet most of us have never been and will never go to Brazil or Nicaragua. Most humans have never met someone who was killed by their spouse yet later on, yet we constantly watch news reports, movies, and television shows about these things. Once you understand that all information is given and promoted to you not for the purposes of information, but to sell you advertising, you are all of a sudden faced with a dilemma. Should you continue to learn and read, or should you just look away? This is the tree of knowledge problem. Is it better to know you are naked, or is it better to walk around naked with your wife blissfully unaware? Is it better to have the knowledge of the world than that burden and scream into the microphone to type into the ether to try to affect change? Or is it better just to let the world go? Be in the matrix and eat the medium rare filet, or live in the real world and eat the gruel? 200 years ago, the ability to be human to have all this knowledge would be very limited. The need to know information was based on whether it affected you in your daily life. You did not need to know how windmills off the coast of New Jersey affected whales in the Atlantic Ocean. You as a farmer or rope maker did not need to know the personal habits of the elites. If you lived in West Virginia, you had no need to know the crime rate in San Francisco. This information we have today has created the populace of anxiety-ridden adults who are concerned with things that they cannot change and that do not affect them. You as a human should be privy to the information that you actually need to know for your daily life. Unless you are responsible or directly affected by information, there is no reason for you to know it. This is not to say you should not be able to do research to improve your life, such as creating a new tool or learning how to become healthier. But as far as having access to the gossip and inner workings of how the systems that make modernity operate, this should probably be need to know information. This information, for instance, economics, is completely useless to the average human being. And is almost completely useless to the people who are in charge of it, if we're being honest. The mentality may seem counterintuitive to my actions, but I've always been a walking contradiction. Hypocrite is a word that just means acting. The Anglos have always bastardized Greek and Roman words. We as men have always strived to be better than what we are. This is not a process of information, but an inner drive to see what is achievable. Unless you're a Zoomer, in which case you just want to spend your life suspended in a pod playing video games and eating dino nuggies. Chapter 6 of 2035. Dropped last Friday. Tom Substack. From the Appalachian Gorilla. 11/18/2024. Links in the description.